put it in a YouTube. He made video is melting
In Cairo,
in Kuwait.
in Kuwait.
Not in Cairo.
Oh.
No, Cairo
Oh,
no,
okay.
is not rich in this part.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, it is.
Subhanallah. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Subhanallah, Subhanallah, alhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah akbar. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Okay, so we ended at the chapter of parents, and now I'm kind of skipping one of the chapters to go into the children. Okay, so we have a couple of ahadith from the Prophet ﷺ about how he treated children. So the Prophet ﷺ was generally very kind to children. We know how he treated children, his own and those that were living in his home. People would bring their children to him ﷺ for them to give dua to him, to them, for the Prophet ﷺ's barakah to reach them. And the parents, so one of these parents that would bring her son to the Prophet ﷺ a lot was Sulaim. And Sulaim was the mother of Anas. So we have this report where Anas radiallahu anh, he reports that he went into the Prophet ﷺ's home one day, and he said, I was with my mother Sulaim, Sulaim, and my aunt Haram. When he came to us, he said, shall I pray with you? And it was not the time for a fard salah. So the Prophet ﷺ himself offered, like, I'm going to make salah with you. And it was not a fard salah. So the man so Anas radiallahu anh is telling this story to a group of men. So one of the men says that, where did you stand? Like, where did the Prophet ﷺ put you? Because these are two women, the Prophet ﷺ and one boy, right? So where did you stand? He said, he put me to his right. And then the women were standing behind me. And he said, then he prayed with us, and he made dua for us, the people of the house, and he prayed that we have the best of blessing in this life and in the life to come. And then my mother said, Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, add some supplication for your young servant. So the mother of Anas is saying, please make dua for my son. And so he prayed to Allah to grant me of every good thing. At the end of his dua, he said, my Lord grant him plenty of wealth and children and bless him. I think we covered this before, where Anas radiallahu anh had like hundreds of grandchildren, and he buried like 107 of his grandchildren. This is the dua that it came from, because he said, Ya Allah, give him wealth and children. So there's a couple of lessons we learn from this story. One is the salah position, right? If you have a man and then you have a boy or another man, he's going to stand to his right, and the Prophet is not going to be in the front, but they're going to stand in the same line. And then the women will be standing in the back. That's one lesson. Then the second lesson we learn from the story is that if, for example, we talked about that a man, when he is not at home, then the woman should not bring another man into the house. The exception for this is that if the husband has allowed someone to come and visit you, and he knows this person had good character, and he would be very happy by his coming, then the woman is allowed to open the door. With the full hijab, she can open the door for him and bring him inside. So it wasn't just Sulaim alone, but it was her sister was there, her son was there, and her husband had, of course, given permission that the Prophet ﷺ can visit any time, which is why he visited them while the head of the household was not present. The third lesson we learned from this hadith is that it is okay to make dua for wealth and children. Not just okay, but it is part of the sunnah to make dua for wealth and children, as long as we are still being obedient to Allah, we still have taqwa, we have the intention to do good with our wealth, and it's not becoming a form of ghafla for us. So the only time when making dua for dunya would become problematic is if somebody neglects the hereafter completely, and they are only making dua for this dunya. And Anas' stepfather was actually Abu Talha. So there are some reports that say that Abu Talha was present, but this narration specifically does not say that he was present. And they're saying that this hadith also shows us the motherly instinct, right? The mother's instinct is always to seek the benefit of her child in every circumstance. So it's very common for mothers to, take their children to the imam, to the sheikh, like, make dua for my children. And there's nothing wrong with that. As long as they know that Allah is the ultimate authority, you can take your child to a righteous person and ask them to make dua for them. And then another hadith where Anas ibn Malik again narrated that a woman came to Aisha radiallahu anha, and Aisha gave her 3 dates. So this woman had 2 boys and she was hungry and she asked for food. So she gave her 3 dates. So what she did was she gave 1 date to each child, and then she kept the 3rd for herself. But then as soon as the kids ate the date, they looked at their mother, and she felt so overcome with compassion that she split it in half and she gave it to her kids. And so that when the Prophet ﷺ came in, Aisha told him about this, And he said, why do you wonder? Like, why are you so surprised by that? He said, God has bestowed grace on her because of her compassion for her children. Like, this is how mothers are. And because she's so merciful, Allah is having mercy on her because of that. So what we learn from this hadith is the household situation of the Prophet ﷺ, that when a beggar came to her door, Aisha radiallahu anha had nothing more to give except for a couple of dates. So she gave 3 of these dates to her kids. To the beggar who gave it to her kids. Okay, so they're saying that in Arabian society at the time, there were 2 types of cities which had 2 types of people. So we had cities and towns like Mecca and Medina where the tribes were strong, the social ties were strong, people knew each other, they had manners, they had learned they had good reputations, they had learned manners from their parents and their grandparents. And then there were desert tribes, like the people who lived out in the desert, the Bedouins, whatever. They didn't have a lot of refined manners. They didn't treat their children very well either. So their roughness, it showed in their clothing, it showed in their speech, it showed in the way they treated each other. So Aisha radiallahu anha reports that one of these Bedouins, he came to the Prophet ﷺ and he asked, do you kiss your children? We don't kiss ours. And the Prophet ﷺ said, how can I help you if God has removed mercy from your heart? Right? So basically, like, what can I do for you? Even as a prophet, I cannot help you because God has just removed the rahmah from your heart. And then Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu reports that the Prophet ﷺ kissed Hasan ibn Ali when Al-Aqra ibn Hamis al-Tamimi was visiting him. So this man, and then Al-Aqra, he said, I have 10 children and I have never kissed any of them. And the Prophet ﷺ looked at him and said, a person who is not merciful will not be shown mercy. So the context of this is that the man was trying to show like some type of like manliness, like bravado, like, yeah, I'm such a man that I have this many children, I've never touched them, I never kissed them, I never, because he saw the Prophet ﷺ doing this, and the Prophet ﷺ looked at him like, that's not a good thing, that's where's the mercy? So he says, a person who's not merciful will not be shown mercy. So these 2 hadith, they show us that the Prophet ﷺ would naturally show this love to his children, to his grandchildren, but sometimes in front of people, he did it on purpose to teach them, to show them that, look, I am Rasulullah and I am the first one to love my children, and you should be loving your children. And what they're saying is that if you as a parent, if you're the first one to show love, you're teaching the child to show love instead of just telling them how you should be. Like if your children look at you and you're not being a certain way to your parents and you're telling them, hey, respect your grandparents, they'll be like, well, you're not respecting your own parents, right? So, and of course a child shouldn't say that, but they learn from example. They don't learn from what we say, they learn from what we do. And then we have an athar, which is a statement of a sahabi, who said that he heard his father say, people used to say that righteousness is from God, but proper conduct is from parents, meaning adab is from parents. So the feeling that you have inside of right and wrong, the taqwa that you have, that comes from Allah. Like Allah teaches you what is right and wrong. Allah gives you that fitrah. But your adab, how do you translate that into your character? That comes from your parents. This is something your parents teach you. So again, it's just saying that your parents' instruction and their example is where children learn good manners. And then it's talking about sibling equality, right? How parents should treat their children equal. So Nu'man bin Bashir said that his father took him to Allah's Messenger ﷺ and said, O Messenger of God, I request you to witness that I've gifted such and such to this son of mine. So he basically took a small child, took him to the Prophet ﷺ and said, I want you to see, like I want you to bear witness that I'm giving this gift to my child. And the Prophet ﷺ asked him a question, have you given the same to all of your children? And he said, no, Ya Rasulullah. Then he said, seek someone else for witness. In another narration, it says, the Prophet ﷺ says, I'm not going to witness injustice. Meaning he says, I don't want to see you giving only one of your children this gift. You can find someone else to witness your gift. Then the Prophet ﷺ asked him, would it not please you that all your children should be equally dutiful to you? Like, don't you want all your children to respect you and honor you and show you kindness? And he said, yes, of course, like that. Why wouldn't I want that? He said, then don't be unequal to your children. Don't do this. Treat them all equally, just like you want to be treated equally by them. So they're basically talking about favoritism, and what the commentator is saying is that it is part of the parents' obligation to not show favoritism. And if they do, they will be held accountable. Because fair treatment when it's coupled with love and kindness for both boys and girls and equal, like the children of different ages, it has to be equal because it's going to make them, it's going to make them have that feeling in their heart towards the parents. Like, oh, my parents treated me equally. They didn't just favor my brother or my sister over me. And we kind of touched upon this before about the cultural difference, right? How some parents, they will value the son, they will value the male child because this is the son that's going to grow up and take care of us, and we have to treat him better. And this, the daughters, whatever, who cares? She's going to get married. She's going to become part of a different family. So there's this idea that the girl does not belong to this family, whereas the son, he's going to carry the lineage forward. So these cultural ignorant mindsets, Islam came to remove them altogether, right? So when it comes to education, when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to teaching them the adab and the akhlaq, when it comes to preserving their honor, all of these things, boys and girls are equal, and all the children have to receive equal treatment. However, if there's a child who has an illness, for example, and they require additional care, they require that extra help, extra money, then it's okay for the parents to focus on that child because the child needs it. Or, for example, you have an adult child who has incurred debt, right? And it wasn't like just carelessness, but it was like a legitimate debt, like they were in financial hardship. They fell into this even though they tried their best not to. So we're not talking about like consumer debt, like you have a child who's a shopaholic and they have credit cards and now the parents are sitting there paying off their money. That's not what it's talking about. Like you have a debt that was legitimately incurred. Now you find yourself in a tight spot and your parents are helping you. That's okay. So if the parents are favoring one child because of need, that's okay. But it shouldn't be because of favoritism. And in Arabic, we talked about this word called bir, right? Bir is goodness. So in the Quran, Allah has this word called al-abrar, right? We have this dua that we make, Ya Allah, make us of the abrar. So Ibn Umar, he explained the meaning of this word, saying that God has called them al-abrar, meaning those who do bir, because they fulfill their duties to their parents and their children, which is the part that a lot of us miss. Every time bir is mentioned, it's only mentioned in the context of treating your parents correctly. But that word includes both the parents and the children. And so Allah praises these people in the Quran because they are doing justice both ways. And then He says, just as you have a duty which you owe to your parents, so you have a duty which you owe to your child. Okay, so the young child, the parent has to make sure that they are fulfilling their physical, emotional, and mental needs. All of these needs are included. So it's not just like, okay, I put food on the table, my job is done, right? Which is a lot of, immigrant parents, they have this mentality where this is what I need to do and my job is done. That's not how the Prophet ﷺ did it, right? He nurtured children, he nurtured people, he nurtured everyone in his family to make them feel seen and heard and valued. And that's where that respect and kindness comes from the heart, right? Then you don't have to force yourself to respect your parents when you have been raised in this way. And the other point is that parents shouldn't forget that it's Allah's pleasure that they're seeking, right? Because sometimes you have difficult children. Now, it's hard to sometimes love a difficult child, right? The parents also have limited capacity. Like the mother might have a greater capacity than the father. But in some cases, if the mother has a mental illness, right, or she's struggling with, she's not going to have that same capacity to extend love and care to her children. But they have to remember then that I'm not just doing this because it's my child. I'm doing it to please Allah. This is an amana. Right? And then Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, he reports the Prophet ﷺ said, a person who is not merciful will not be shown mercy. So we have a lot of these repetitions of the same hadith but of different wordings just to show that there were so many different companions who heard this from the Prophet ﷺ. And Imam Bukhari himself, he repeats this similar narrations over and over to show us the importance of them. And then Jarir ibn Abdullah, he also reports that the Prophet ﷺ said, God will not show mercy to one who shows no mercy to the people. And then he reports again that the Prophet ﷺ said, a person who does not treat people with compassion will not be treated by God with compassion. And then another narration about the Bedouin Arabs, that one of them said, Ya Rasulullah, do you kiss your children? Because we don't kiss ours. And the Prophet ﷺ said, how can I help you if God has removed mercy from your heart? We have two narrations like this. And then we have Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh, who said, I heard Allah's Messenger ﷺ say that God, the Most Mighty, has divided mercy into 100 parts. He retained 99 parts and placed one single part on earth. It is through this single part that creatures are merciful to one another, to the extent that an animal may lift his hoof so that she does not kick her baby, right? Like an animal is careful not to even hurt her baby by accident. So this one part of Allah's mercy, it covers human mothers, it covers animals, it covers all the love and mercy that we ever feel in this world, comes from that one part that Allah has given us over here. So the point of this hadith is to fill us with hope, right? Because we know that when we talked a little bit about this last class, with the difficult relationships that we have, the parents and children who don't get along, right? The children who might mistreat their parents by accident, the parents who might have narcissistic tendencies, and they have now mistreated their children, and the children have left Islam. There are so many ways in which we hurt each other. And so I found it really interesting that he ends the hadith with, the chapter with this hadith, because he wants to bring, after talking about human relations, he wants to bring Allah back into the picture and show us that on the Day of Judgment, Allah has 99 parts of mercy. So that when we show up and we have all these complaints against each other, of course we should try to rectify them here, right? But Allah has so much mercy that He's waiting for us on that day as well. And so we have, and that one part of mercy, it's enough for us right now to take from that, right? To build in us that mercy for our parents and children. And Allah's mercy, like in Surah Mulk, Allah says, تَبَارَكَ الَّذِي بِيَدِهِ الْمُلْكُ, right? So blessed is He in whose hands is dominion. Everything that comes from Allah is blessed. Everything that comes from Allah has barakah. So even that one part of mercy that Allah has, it's beyond imagination how it could spread mercy all throughout the land, just that one part, right? Because there's so much barakah in it and it never ends. All right, so the next chapter is about good neighborliness and being a good neighbor. So we're making the transition from family into society now. So the Prophet ﷺ has these hadith, and this one is in particular very strong, where Aisha radiallahu anha reports, the Prophet ﷺ said that Jibreel continued to enjoin to me to be good to my neighbor until I thought that he would include him among my heirs, like inheritance laws. So like Jibreel came to Prophet ﷺ himself, started instructing him on all the rights of the neighbor. And he kept going and kept going and kept going until the Prophet ﷺ himself thought that he's going to say that you even have to give inheritance to your neighbors. To that extent, like he didn't know when he's going to stop, right? And it's really interesting because we never think about our neighbors, right? Like we never think about, we think about our friends, our coworkers, our family, all the issues that we have, but we never ever think about our neighbors. Are they getting by okay? Do they have money? Or do they have any problems that we can help them with? Is anybody sick next door, right? That I can, make some soup for them and give it to them. And it's hard living in this society, right? It is hard. So what can we do if our neighbor doesn't like us, or they don't want to see us, or they want nothing to do with us? We can continue to be kind, right? We can, like in the winter, we can shovel their snow for them, right? We can rake their leaves for them. We can, tell them, let them know, build that relationship. Like, hey, if you're going on vacation and you want me to look out for you, check your mail for you, I can do that. Let them do it for you. Of course, after you build that trust, right? There's so many ways in which we can treat our neighbors and be well with them. And if we don't have that culture of, making dishes and giving it, we could buy a cookie box from outside, give it to them on their holidays. They give it to us on our holidays. Of course, not holidays like Christmas or anything, but like maybe Thanksgiving, you give them something. Or they have a birthday in the family, you give their child something. Those kinds of things, they build that relationship, right? So anything we can do, anything small, we should make sure to do it. But before that even, we have to make sure we don't harm our neighbors, right? Don't leave trash in their way. Don't take their parking. Right? Parking wars, we have these in every neighborhood. Don't play loud music, or you have parties. Make sure that your guests don't park in front of the neighbor's house. These kinds of things. Sometimes as Muslims, we don't care about these things, right? Like in Ramadan, we parked, some of the people who came for Taraweeh, they parked in the lady's house, the one who lives across the street from us, and they parked in her, the grass, yeah, so they put the caution tape, it's probably still there. And she complained. She called the masjid and she complained because, and I don't know what else they were doing, it was making a lot of noise and stuff, and her husband was sick, and it's just really bad. It makes us look bad, right? So whether this is your house neighbor or your masjid neighbor, we have to make sure that we treat people properly. All right, Abu Shuraih al-Khuzai reports, the Prophet said, whoever believes in God in the last day should be good to his neighbor. Whoever believes in God in the last day should be hospitable to his guest. Whoever believes in Allah in the last day should say what is good or remain silent. So the wording here the Prophet used is on purpose to grab your attention, because anybody who's listening, any Muslim, they're like, wait, I believe in Allah in the last day, right? Like you're like, that's me. So the Prophet ﷺ is telling you, hey, pay attention. And he says these three things: be good to your neighbor, be hospitable to your guest, and either say good or remain silent. Okay. So just kind of going into what does it mean to be a good neighbor? But it's talking more. I think these guidelines are more relevant for a Muslim culture, a place where I guess even in America, their neighborhoods used to be like this. I remember a time when I was growing up, like in my grandmother's neighborhood, and even the white ladies next door, they knew each other. They had a language barrier, but they would still talk to each other, and they would look out for each other's kids and grandkids. We don't really have that anymore. What they're basically saying is that you should strengthen your family ties and then strengthen the community ties by getting to know your neighbors, doing things for them, things like that. But, and if something happens in their house, like they lose somebody, then go offer condolences, right? If they have a wedding, go give them congratulations, things like that. Of course, we just adapt it to our society, and we can give them gifts or whatever. Okay. And then he also makes a note about being materialistic. So in societies where there are not strong social networks, people are forced to become materialistic, right? Because they have no other choice except to rely on their money. So you work for more money because you have this feeling of no one's going to be here for me. No one's going to be there to take care of me. I'm going to be alone because we haven't built those networks. We haven't built the community, right? So one of the things that we can do is build WhatsApp groups, right? And there's Facebook groups for that, depending on where you live and people your age, people with the same interests. And when, I've seen, like, for example, when Muslim women, one of them has a baby and she can't make meals for herself, people organize a meal train, right? These are the different ways in which we can build community networks, and it's very important for us to do that. So when it comes to offense against neighbors, there is a very strong warning for that. So Al-Miqdad ibn Aswad said that Rasulullah ﷺ asked his companions about adultery, and they answered, it is prohibited. God and his Messenger ﷺ have made it absolutely forbidden. The Prophet ﷺ said, for a man to commit adultery with 10 women is less serious than to commit adultery with his neighbor's wife. So just one wife, the neighbor's wife, is worse than 10 women. Why? It's because he trusts him, right? The neighbor doesn't expect you to go into his house, and he trusts you. Then he goes on to say, he asked them about stealing, and they say it is prohibited. And God and his Messenger ﷺ have absolutely forbidden it. The Prophet ﷺ said, for a man to steal from 10 houses is a lesser crime than to steal from his neighbor's home. Right? How many Amazon packages go missing? They go missing, right? Yeah. Stealing from your neighbor. That's basically what it is. So the Prophet ﷺ basically makes it clear that any kind of immorality, dishonesty, any bad thing that you can do, any sin that you can commit, when you commit it against your neighbor, it's 10 times worse. Because that person lives next to you, they trust you. You guys have built this like at least you nod at each other or wave at each other when you leave the house or something, right? This person doesn't expect you to stab them in the back, and you do that. It's a form of betrayal, which is why he said that it's so bad. And there's other hadith that mention the adultery thing, where they say that sometimes a person may attempt to seduce, his neighbor's wife, by giving gifts or whatever kind of thing. And for him, the punishment is much worse than for that who is a regular person committing adultery. Okay, so one of the other lessons that we learn is that if you have a special relationship with someone and you make use of this relationship for illegitimate gain, it's viewed very seriously by Allah. So spiritual abuse would fall under this, right? Spiritual abuse would be someone comes to you, like you're an imam, you're an Islamic teacher, you're someone who's in a position to give advice, someone comes to you for Islamic advice, they come to you with family problems, health problems, marital problems, and you take advantage of them being in a vulnerable situation, right? Because they came to you seeking that safety, that comfort, they were vulnerable, and you took advantage of them. That is much worse in the eyes of Allah, because that was a powerless person, so you basically did dhulm on that person, right? Okay, so neighborly treatment. Ibn Umar reports that the Prophet ﷺ said, actually it's the same hadith. Yeah. include him among my heirs. Mujahid said that a sheep was slaughtered for Abdullah ibn Amr. He repeatedly asked his servant, "Have you sent some meat as a present to our Jewish neighbor?" I heard God's Messenger ﷺ say, Jibreel continued to enjoin me to be good to my neighbors until I thought that he would include him among the heirs. So Mujahid was basically saying that when he slaughtered a sheep, he kept asking his servant over and over, like, did you deliver the meat to the Jewish neighbor? Because he didn't want him to forget. Even though he had the intention, he was so diligent about this task. Like, it's kind of like when you ask somebody, like, did you give the zakat? Did you pay the zakat this Ramadan? Like that. That's how serious he was. He kept asking him, are you sure you delivered the meat to the neighbor? When it comes to a neighbor with a different religion, right, like Jews and Christians or any kind of person, we still have to treat them with the same respect. So these rights of the neighbors that we've been discussing so far, it's not just for Muslim neighbors. It includes Jewish, Christian, all other kinds of people, because neighborly rights are human rights, right? They're not just Muslim rights, but they are human rights. And Aisha radhiyallahu anha reports that she said to the Prophet ﷺ, Messenger of God, I have two neighbors. To whom shall I direct my present? He said, to the one whose door is closest to yours. So it's just kind of like if you're living in an apartment building, you know, who has more right over you? It's the one whose door is closest to you. So she only had one gift, so she said, who should I give it to? So he said, give it to the one that's closest to you. And then Hasan al-Basri, rahimahullah, he said, who is a neighbor? And he said, one's neighbors are 40 houses ahead of one, 40 houses to one's back, 40 houses to one's right, and 40 houses to one's left. That's intense. That's like the whole neighborhood, right? If you're living in an apartment, that's the whole floor, the whole building, the whole apartment building. So those are your neighbors. And that just, I don't know, it just makes me reflect, because have you ever been like sick or you had a headache and like the person downstairs or next to you can't stop playing their music? And it's just like annoying you so bad, and then you go and knock on their door, they don't care. And then you have to like threaten them, you complain about them, I'm gonna call the cops, I'm gonna do this. They don't listen to you, right? Because people are so careless. It ruins your life, right? Or like the people with little kids and they don't stop their kids from running. Like, I get it, at some age kids are, you know, they're hard to control. But sometimes people don't attempt to control their kids at all. They're like, yeah, it's my house, I don't care if it disturbs you, whatever. So it shows like this lack of adab, shows a careless attitude, like you're being selfish in that sense and not caring about what others say. So having a bad neighbor can ruin your life, literally, right? Which is why there's so much emphasis here. So Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh said, do not begin with your distant neighbor ahead of the one closer to you. Rather, give priority to a nearer neighbor ahead of your more distant one. And then Ibn Umar said, there was a time when a person felt that he had no greater claim to his own money than his Muslim brother. Now people love their money more than their Muslim brother. I heard the Prophet ﷺ say, many a neighbor will hold his neighbor on the day of judgment and say, my Lord, this one closed his door to me and denied me neighborly kindness. So your neighbor can show up on the day of judgment and say something against you and say that this person did not treat me well. Abdullah ibn Abbas states that he heard the Prophet ﷺ say, he is not a true believer who eats his fill when his neighbor is hungry. Abu Dhar reports, my close friend, meaning the Prophet ﷺ, enjoined three things upon me. Listen and obey, even if the ruler is a slave with cut off limbs. If you cook a broth, give it plenty of water, then choose some of your neighbors and give them a share. So like if you're cooking like a dish, just add more water so it becomes more soupy, increases the amount so you can share with more people. Offer your prayers at the best time. Then if you find that the imam has finished his prayer, you will have secured your prayer. If not, you will join him and it will count as voluntary prayer for you. So three things. He basically told them to listen to the ruler, even if the ruler is like somebody that people don't respect. He said if you cook a broth, then make it plentiful and offer your prayers at the best time. So when it comes to the ruler, you can obey him as long as his intent is to keep law and order in Muslim society. But the second that he goes against what God prohibits, then you cannot obey him as well. And then the prayer thing, it goes back to that thing where adab is about between you and Allah, between you and the people, and like how you deal with society, right? So all three things are covered in this hadith as well. And if you have already prayed, like if you're joining a fard salah and the imam is praying a fard salah, but you have already prayed fard, you still join the congregation, but for you it's nafil. So if you're going into the masjid, it's better adab for you to just join it, even if you already prayed at home. and then it'll be nafil for you. All right. So Abdullah bin Amr quotes the Prophet ﷺ as saying, the best of companions in God's sight is the one who is best to his companion, and the best of neighbors in God's sight is the one who is best to his neighbor. So by companion, they mean friend here, or someone who's close to you, and then by neighbor is just someone who lives next to you. An-Nafi' ibn Abdul Harith reports that the Prophet ﷺ said, among the things that contribute to the happiness of a Muslim are a spacious dwelling, a good neighbor, and a comfortable means of transport. And another narration also mentions a good spouse. Right? These are the 4 things that are considered one of the biggest blessings of dunya. So like a house where you don't feel constricted, a nice, comfortable house, a good neighbor, a comfortable means of transport, and a good spouse. And then Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu reports that the Prophet used to say in a supplication, my Lord, I seek refuge with you from a bad neighbor in my place of abode, for a temporary neighbor is bound to depart. So this is actually something worth making dua for. If you're looking for a house, look for a good neighborhood, right? We usually only look at the crime and all that kind of stuff, but sometimes your neighbors being mean can also make your life miserable, right? So you should make dua for Allah to give you a good neighborhood and to protect you from bad neighbors. Abu Musa al-Ash'ari reports that the Prophet ﷺ said, the last hour will not be due until a man kills his neighbor, his brother, and his father. Meaning for them, it was kind of unimaginable to do this, right? Because they valued tribal ties, right? Like the reason why the Quraysh hated Islam so much is because they said this man is making fathers and sons fight against each other, right? So for them, it was unheard of that you would kill your own father, you would kill your own brother, you would kill your neighbor. If they went to war, it was over like matters of honor or money or things like that. So the Day of Judgment, one of the signs of the Day of Judgment is that people will kill their neighbors, they will kill their father, and they will kill their brothers, their family members. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu mentions that the Prophet said, that the people said to the Prophet, O Messenger of God, a certain woman stands up for prayer at night and fasts during the day and does many a good thing and gives money for charity, but she offends her neighbors with what she says. This is a really interesting one. It's kind of a warning. Okay, so this woman, she's doing all her personal ibadah. She's praying 5 times. She's doing the 5 pillars of Islam. She's fasting. She's doing everything. She's giving the sadaqah, but she's offending her neighbors with what she says. She's making people feel bad. Just her neighbors. The Prophet said she is devoid of goodness, and she is one of the people of the fire. And they said a certain woman prays only obligatory prayers. So this other woman only prays her fard, and she gives very little in sadaqah. But she does not offend anyone. She doesn't abuse people with her tongue. She doesn't cause misery for anybody. The Prophet said she is one of the people of heaven. So this is one of the key hadiths that teaches us the importance of interpersonal relationships, right? Communal relationships. That we think that worship is just between me and Allah. And a lot of people think that, right? It's just between me and Allah. But if you have worshipped Allah your whole life, even doing the extra nawafil, but you have mistreated others, they can come on the Day of Judgment and take all of that away from you, right? And one of the reasons why people do this so much is that they think that their voluntary worship is going to replace the mistreatment. Because many people, they know that they're mistreating others, right? Some might be a little bit, like have mental health issues or something. They don't know. But most people who are mistreating others, they know they're doing it. So they think like, oh, maybe I'll just worship Allah extra. I'll just get some extra credit points with Allah, and He'll forgive me for the rest. But that's not how it works. And usually these same people also have a sense of arrogance about their personal worship. Oh, I prayed Tahajjud that night. I do this much dhikr. I fast these many days. I don't have to treat people well because I do so much worship. This is called self-deception, right? This is one of the ways in which shaitan deceives you, and then you start deceiving yourself, right? So it's better to, if you do your fara'id and you treat people well, you're on the right track. It's better to do that than to do lots and lots and lots of nawafil and then mistreat people. Okay. We'll cover this one hadith about unkind neighbors, and then we'll move to the next chapter. So Abu Hurairah radiallahu narrates that the Prophet said, a person whose neighbors are unsafe from his evil schemes shall not be admitted into heaven. So this is on par with like arrogance and some of those other things, like, the woman who dresses, but she doesn't, like, she's dressed but naked, for example. Like, she will not be entered into heaven. The person who has even a mustard seed will not be entered into heaven. So this is one more person in that category whose neighbors are unsafe from his evil schemes. Meaning this person is meticulous, like they're planning, they're malicious, like they're sitting there crafting plans on how to make their neighbor's life hell, right? And we see this in like soap operas all the time, right? And it's people actually do that. They sit around, they have so much time, they're like, how can I make this person's life difficult? And this kind of person will not be entering Jannah. All right, so this hadith is a really, really interesting one. So there's a hadith where the people asked, and I'll give the explanation after the hadith. So Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh reports the Prophet ﷺ was asked, who are the most noble of people? Like, what kind of people are considered the best kinds of people? And he said the most noble in God's view are the most God-fearing among them. And they said, no, we're not asking about that. We're not asking about religion. We're asking about in the society, right? Because when he said taqwa, they were thinking, that's like a religious thing. Like, we want to know something more, like in terms of how people view them. Who are the best people? He said the most noble among them was Yusuf alayhi salam, a prophet and a son of a prophet, who was the grandson of God's friend Ibrahim. They said again, we're not asking about that either. Like, we're not asking about a specific person. He inquired then, are you asking me about the metals of the Arabs? And I'll explain what metals means here. And they said, yes, we're asking about the metals of the Arabs. And he said, the best of you in the days of ignorance are the best in Islam. Like, the best of you in Jahiliyyah are the best in Islam, provided that they acquire a deep insight into it. So the metal is metal, like the metals, like gold, silver, platinum, like that, bronze. So the reason the Arabs basically had this way, they had this categorization of people. They would describe people as being good or bad in terms of using gold or silver or bronze or whatever metals they had, iron, to show that this person is very strong, or this person is very malleable, or this person is, cheap, or this person is very valuable, right? Depending on the metal quality. So based on that, they asked him. And so what the Prophet is basically explaining, and actually there's another hadith that goes with this, that says people are like mines of gold and silver. The best of them before Islam is the best of them in Islam if they acquire a deep understanding. What that means is that the simple acceptance of Islam is not what makes you better, but rather everything that you were before Islam, you bring that with you into Islam, and then you refine it. And you learn the spirit of Islam. What does Islam actually ask of me? What does it stand for? Beyond the rituals, right? So even for Muslims who have been born Muslim, for us this would be kind of like a rebirth, right? It's that time when we recommit ourselves to Allah. We recommit ourselves to the path, and we say, I'm gonna become a better Muslim. We do this every Friday, every Ramadan, right? When you go for Hajj, when you go for Umrah, you redo the intention, you say, Allah, I'm coming back to you, right? So what he's saying is that some people, they have certain traits, like there are certain cultures and tribes that are better than others. And they are better than others because of their akhlaq and their adab. So, sometimes we think in Ramadan, you'll see two types of people in Ramadan. And I have to use this example because it pertains to our masjid, okay? In Ramadan, you'll see two types of people here in this masjid. You will have the people who will stand in line and they'll forego their food and they'll make sure that others get fed first, and they'll stay hungry all the way till the end until every single community member has been fed, and then they will eat after every single person they see in their vicinity has been fed. And there are other people who not everybody at their table has even had food yet, and they will start filling food into their containers from home. And we see this at different masajid, right? It's not just this masjid. We see this everywhere. If we go masjid hopping in the DMV, wherever we go, we see this. Now the question is, why? Why? Okay, let's take the legitimate excuses out of the way first, and let's have some husn done first, right? Maybe someone is poor. They don't have food at home. They need that food for suhoor. Let's say they have nothing. Okay, that's between them and Allah, right? May Allah take care of them, and we don't judge them. But there are others who, they don't have that sense of poverty. They don't have that need. They don't have that, like kind of that the need. They don't have the need to do it, right? But they're still doing it. Why is that? It's because they haven't received the training. The training that comes from home, right? The training that the parents were supposed to give them. The trainings that even from the spouses can also learn from each other, right? Like if two spouses from different backgrounds or different socioeconomic statuses get married, or from different cultures, you know, they can teach each other things. And we live in this culture where it's like when you say something to someone, they say, don't judge me, right? And we have this like idea of judgment. But think about judgment as discernment, because some ideas are better than others. And some lifestyles, some ways of doing things are better than others, right? Not everything is always the same. So when we come across something that we're uncomfortable with, or that you know, that's not, you know, the way our people do things, either we keep it or we can change it, right? We can change it. But it has to be like, okay, which one is more closer to Islam, right? So it's not like you have to throw your culture out the window completely, but whatever cultural practice you have, be like, is this in line with Islam, right? So when it comes to the food example that I just gave, some people are showing generosity and forbearance and hilm and patience, whereas others are showing hastiness and greed and, you know, those kinds of qualities, like being cheap. And being frugal and being cheap are also not the same thing, which people actually don't realize. Like if you need something and you don't buy it because you have the money but you just don't buy it because you want to hold on to your money, that's called being cheap. And Islam looks down upon that, right? Even Imam Al-Ghazali, he looks down upon that. That you're not supposed to not spend on the things that you need. So the person who can't even spend on the things that they need, that's a cheap person. Being frugal is like, okay, I'm limited, I have limited means, so I'm going to be smart. I'm going to budget, I'm going to be smart about what I can buy, I'm not going to waste my money, that kind of thing. So when people with I guess like a low, the way he said it is, the way the commentator said it is high values and principles versus low values and principles. So when you have someone who has low values and principles, or they don't have much life experience, the way now that they represent Islam is going to be wrong, because they didn't rectify themselves. That's why the Prophet ﷺ so importantly said that the best of you in the days of Jahiliyyah are the best of you in Islam, provided that you reach a deep understanding, right? Because we as Muslims, whatever we do is da'wah. Every time we go to ICNA or like these big conferences and conventions, have you seen the bathrooms? The bathrooms are a nightmare. Like people throw diapers down the toilet, people throw pads down the toilet. Like it's really bad how we as Muslims conduct ourselves. And it's really telling of our priorities. Like we just think it's just all about us and Allah. And then we also have the audacity to be proud about it. Like we're Muslim. Like, okay, we have our chest out, we're walking proudly, like we're Muslim. Okay, but what about treating people with care? We're ruining the janitors' lives who are cleaning the bathrooms when we're doing that, right? So we're not only misrepresenting Islam, but we're showing ourselves as like low-class people in their terms, right? In their eyes. So what the Prophet is saying is like, basically be classy, right? Be a good person. Don't make life difficult for other people. We as Muslims don't treat service workers as well as Westerners a lot of times treat service workers, right? So never mind that they don't have other akhlaq and morals that we do, but we should be learning from them, right? And they should be learning from us. But sadly, they don't see us as people worth learning from because we don't present ourselves that way, right? That's what he's talking about, that when people see you, Muslims, as a group in public, be classy, right? Conduct yourselves with respect in a respectable way. When people see you, they're like, these are the Muslims, right? That's how you should be. Okay, so the next chapter is about caring for the weak. So there's an athar where there's an ayah, which Allah says, shall the reward of good be anything but good? Hal jaza'ul ihsan illa al-ihsan. So one of the tabi'een, he said that this applies to both the dutiful and the errant. This applies to both the person who does good and the person who does bad. Okay, so what he's saying is that anyone who looks after a vulnerable or a weak person, including widows and orphans, will have their reward, and there will be no reward taken away from them. So whatever good they give, Allah's going to give them much more than that. It's often stated that Islam builds a close-knit community in which the individual cares for the whole community. Okay. So yeah, so he's basically saying like you start caring for those who are vulnerable and then extend that care to others, and then you start building that community that he was talking about earlier. So in the weak society, like the orphan child and the vulnerable people are the ones who are taken the most advantage of. And a strong society is one in which the weakest are taken care of the most. And if that doesn't happen, then it's going to cause a lot of chaos. And it goes back to that thing about materialism and consumerism and people becoming selfish and greedy, because we haven't laid the foundations of people feeling cared for and being cared for. So it becomes every man for himself, right? And when you live in a society like that, now you can't have another person's back, they don't have your back, and everyone lives in loneliness and these pockets of isolation, which is what we're seeing now, right? The loneliness and everything. Okay, so Abu Hurairah, he reports that the Prophet ﷺ said, a person who looks after a widow and needy individuals is like those who join jihad for God's cause, like the one who fasts in the day and stands up in prayer during the night. So we all know the status of the one who fasts during the day, right? If they fast a lot, they'll be asked to enter from the gate of Ar-Rayyan, right? The gate of fasting. We know that for every day that they fasted a nafil fast, they will be 70,000 years away from hellfire, right? That's from Hadith Qudsi. So we know the status of the person who fasts. We also know the status of the person who does jihad, right, for the sake of Allah. So the Prophet compares that person, the person who does jihad and the person who fasts, and the person who prays tahajjud to the one who looks after a needy and a widow or an orphan, right? To show us that your private acts of worship are not, again, as important as your communal acts of worship when it comes to the nawafil, right? When it comes to the fard, it's between you and Allah. That comes first. When it comes to nawafil, you have to deal with the people first. Okay, so just explain that same thing. All right, Aisha radiallahu anha, she said that a woman came to me with her 2 daughters. She asked me for something, but I could not find except a single date which I gave to her. She divided it between her 2 daughters and then got up and left. When the Prophet ﷺ came in, I told him what happened. He said, whoever looks after such girls and is good to them, they will be for him a shield from the fire. So, similar hadith to the one before, but she took care of her daughters, and the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever will do that will be protected from hellfire. And another narration, it's mentioned that these girls were possibly orphans. So the Prophet ﷺ said that I and the orphan's guardian will be in heaven like these 2. So like he put his finger together, and he said, I will be like this to the one who supports the orphan. And what does that mean? Where will you be if the Prophet ﷺ is like this with you? Firdaus. Jannatul Firdaus, right? Because if you want to be a neighbor of the Prophet ﷺ, that's where you have to be. So he's basically telling you that if you take care of an orphan, you will be in Jannatul Firdaus, inshallah. That's all I got. Okay, then we have an athar by Hassan al-Basri, rahimahullah, who said, an orphan used to attend Ibn Umar when he had his meals. One day he called for food and looked for the orphan, but he could not find him. The orphan arrived after Ibn Umar had finished eating. Ibn Umar called for more food to be brought for the orphan, but there was none. So he fetched sawiq. I don't know what sawiq is, but I think it's like some type of dish, and honey. So the Ibn Umar was eating, and then the food ran out, right? And there was this orphan boy that was a servant. So by the time he called the boy to eat, there was no more food. So he thought, okay, I gotta feed him something. So he gave him sawiq and honey, and he said, eat this, by Allah, you are not a loser. And then Hassan commented, nor was Ibn Umar a loser. I don't really know what they mean by loser, but I think it means I don't want you to be left out of having this, right? And then Al-Hassan said that, and Ibn Umar, because he did that, he didn't lose out on any of the reward as well. Sahel ibn Sa'ad reports that the Prophet ﷺ said, I and the orphan's guardian are in heaven are like this, and he did that again. And then Abdullah ibn Umar, again, the same one from before, they said he would not have a meal unless an orphan joined eating with him. So he would never ever eat a meal alone unless he would have somebody come and join him. Abu Hurairah reports that the Prophet ﷺ says, the best home in a Muslim society is a home where an orphan is well treated. The worst home in a Muslim society is one in which an orphan suffers ill treatment. I and the guardian of an orphan will be in heaven like these two. And he put his fingers together like this again. So he's saying that if you, if an orphan is taken in by a family, the household of the family, the head of the household might be like the uncle, right? Or might be the grandfather, or somebody who's closely related, which is why they took in the orphan in the first place. But the wife of the head of household might not like that, right? The children of the household might not like that. Like, why are we taking in this random kid? You know, our money, our resources are going to go to this kid, and they might mistreat the child. Even if the man doesn't, the family members might mistreat the child. That's why there's so much emphasis, and the Prophet ﷺ said this, that the Muslim household in which the orphan is mistreated is the worst of households, because he wanted to make sure that he's telling the Muslim families that if you have an orphan in your home, make sure you're treating them the same as your children, if not better, right? Because in Surah Baqarah, we have the ayah where Allah says, like, if you take the wealth of an orphan, it's like you're eating the fire. The fire is in your belly. Like, just prepare yourself, basically, right? There's an athar by Abdurrahman ibn Abza. He said that the Prophet Dawood alayhi salam said, be to the orphan child like a compassionate father. Know that you will only reap what you sow. How miserable poverty is after wealth. Worse still is the pursuit of error after having had guidance. When you give your friend a promise, keep it. If you do not, it will bring about enmity between you. Seek refuge with God against a companion who, when you remember something, does not help you, and you forget, does not remind you. Okay, so this is like, we have some narrations where that talk about the teachings of other prophets, right? Which I just find so interesting every time they come up. So Dawood alayhi salam, he was saying all this, like, and he started with the orphan child. So at the list of his priorities in terms of the good things that you should do is that treat the orphan child like a compassionate father. Not just the father. Don't just provide for the child. Like a compassionate father. Why? Where does compassion usually come from? Who does it usually come from? The mom. And the orphan doesn't have a dad by definition in Islam, right? Like, if you have a mom, if you have a dad, but you don't have a mom, you're not considered an orphan, right? But if you don't have a dad and you have a mom, you're considered an orphan. And if you don't have both, you're an orphan. So he's saying, be to the orphan child like a compassionate father, because you don't know if the child is getting that compassion, if they have a mother or not, right? So don't just provide for the child, be their father and their mother, right? And there's a number of other things that he said, like, keep your promise to your friend, and protect yourself from people who, well, he's describing a bad friend, basically, which I do think is interesting. He says a bad friend is someone who, they will break their promise to you. When you do remember something and you're about to do something good, they're not going to help you in it, because there might be jealousy, there might be some competitiveness there. They don't want to help you in good. And if you forget to do something good, they won't remind you. Like, they won't remind you of salah. They won't remind you of, like, hey, did you pay your zakat? Did you, like, whatever, did you remember to fast Arafah? You send each other text messages, right? Like, hey, remember to fast Arafah? If you have a bad friend, they don't care. They're not going to do anything. And this is talking about deliberate, people who do this deliberately, not by accident. Okay. Some more things about the orphans. Okay, so they're saying, what if there's a misbehaving orphan? And then what do you do? So there was a athar in which somebody was asked, like, in the presence of Aisha radiallahu anha, there was a mention of disciplining an orphan. Like, can you discipline the orphan the way you discipline your kids at home? And she said that I would discipline an orphan even though he would lie on the floor. Meaning, she's saying, sometimes kids, when they get very, like, when they have a tantrum and they lie on the floor and they refuse to get up, she's saying, even if the kid was being that, like, stubborn, I would still discipline them, because kind treatment does not mean that you spoil the orphan, right? So she's basically saying, and we know that Aisha radiallahu anha, she was a faqihah, right? She was somebody who the Sahaba came to for legal rulings. So she's saying that I would basically even if it was stubbornly rebellious, I would still discipline the orphan. And this is not only acceptable, but it's needed, right? Because you have taken guardianship, and guardianship means not just kindness and food and protection and all that. It means discipline and teaching them manners. So if you have taken an orphan, then treat them the way you would your children. So if your children did something wrong, and you would punish them, discipline them, do the same with an orphan. But don't go beyond, right? Don't transgress beyond where they might feel like unloved and uncared for and all that. Okay. Which time do we have? 5 minutes. Okay, so actually, this is talking the loss of one's children. Wasn't sure if we should cover it, but I guess we can. So Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh reports that the Prophet ﷺ said, any Muslim who loses 3 of his children would not be touched by the fire except for the fulfillment of God's oath. Okay, so the oath here is actually the ayah that Allah says, there is not one among you who shall not pass over it. This is for your Lord a decree that must be fulfilled. Like in a hadith, I don't know if it was a hadith or hadith Qudsi, where Allah had told hellfire that you will have your fill, right? So Allah has made an oath to hellfire. So yeah, there will be people who will be sent to hellfire, and they have to be. There's no way that they will escape it. But what the Prophet is saying is that if you lose 3 of your children, then you would not be touched by the fire.
This is going to be heaven for Palestine.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also referring to the sirat actually, because on the sirat, we will all pass by hell. So it's kind of like, that's our taste of hell. Like everybody will have a taste of hell because they're all going to pass over it. So the person who loses their children, they're going to pass by so quickly as if they barely felt it. So they're not going to, like the horror that we're going to see and feel on the sirat, they're not going to feel that because they're just going to go right past it. Abu Hurairah said, a woman came to the Prophet ﷺ and she was carrying a young boy. She said to him, pray for him, for I have already buried 3 children. And the Prophet ﷺ said, you have placed a very heavy shield protecting you from the fire. So she was like kind of in pain, like imagine this mother, she brings her child and she's saying like, please pray for him and his life because I have 3 dead children. Like I can't bear to lose even one more. So the Prophet ﷺ in his emotional intelligence, seeing her pain, he said that you have a very heavy shield in front of you between you and the fire. So don't let the grief overtake you of your children because it's actually good news for you. And then Khalid al-Absi, he said, a son of mine died and my grief for him was very keen. I said to Abu Hurairah, have you ever heard anything from the Prophet ﷺ to console us for the loss of our dead? He said, I heard the Prophet ﷺ say, your children are the ever-present young ones in heaven. Like they're basically in heaven right now and they're like having fun, right? And we know that Ibrahim alayhi salam is the one that's taking care of them. Because when the Prophet ﷺ went to Isra wal Mi'raj and he met Ibrahim alayhi salam, I saw a man standing in Jannah near a tree, and he was very old and he had a long beard and there were lots of kids all around him. And that was Ibrahim alayhi salam. So the kids are basically hanging out with him right now in Jannah. And then there's another longer hadith where it's added that each of them will meet their parents on the Day of Judgment, hold their hands or their clothes, and they will not let go of them until they have entered Jannah. So the kids will basically be tugging at their parents' clothes until they take them into Jannah. And Jabir ibn Abdullah reports, the Prophet ﷺ said, anyone who loses 3 of his children and accepts their loss with resignation will be admitted into heaven. We said, Ya Rasulullah, what about 2? He said, even 2. And then the narrator, one of the tabi'een, he said to the narrator, by God, I think that had you said that about 1, he would have given a similar answer. And Jabir ibn Abdullah says, I think so too. So there's a Sahabi saying that, yes, I think he would say the same thing about 1 child. Okay, so the next hadith is kind of similar. Okay, and then Anas ibn Malik reports the Prophet ﷺ said, anyone who loses 3 children before they have attained puberty will be admitted together with them into heaven. Okay, so he said that why did the Prophet ﷺ mention the resigned acceptance? Like, what does that even mean? He's basically saying this refers to the parent who does not complain against Allah, right? There's a difference between complaining to Allah and against Allah. So when you complain to Allah, you're taking your pain to Allah, you're taking your frustration, you're telling Ya Allah, like you're telling him, I'm in pain, please help me. You're crying to him. That's okay, right? The prophets did that. Yaqub alayhi salam, he complained to Allah. But when you complain against Allah, that's like, why me? Why did Allah do this to me? I don't deserve this. How could Allah do this to me? And you're questioning Allah's decree. this reward is not for them. This reward is for the parents who accept it, because Allah knows how hard it is for the parent to accept the child's death. So this is why the reward is just Jannah, straight up Jannah, nothing else in the middle, right? All right, so we'll stop over here. Actually, so this applies basically to the miscarriage as well. It applies to the woman who has a miscarriage as well. All right, سبحان ربك رب العزة ما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Do you have any questions, comments? Yeah. Yes. So you already prayed? No, not if your kids start praying at home. This is referring to like the jama'ah at the masjid.
Just only in the masjid,
Yeah, not at home. No. You don't have to join them. I mean, even at the masjid, I don't think it was saying that you have to join them like it's fard, it's recommended. It's not fard to join them. Like if you already prayed Isha at home, for example, and you come to the masjid, they're praying Isha, you can join them and it'll be nafil for you, but you don't have to join them. Yeah. But for the men, they actually recommend it because the way one of the sheikhs said it was so funny. He's like, the last thing you want to see is walk into a masjid and see a man sitting on the side not praying while everybody else is praying. It looks weird, and it breaks the morale of the community, and it makes the person's reputation look bad, because they'll think you're somebody who doesn't pray, right? And you don't want to do that. So for women, it's fine, whatever. But for men especially, they should come into the masjid, just join this jama'ah, and, because it just looks weird. That's all. Yeah.